My name is Will, and this is the 5th video in a series about the DC Comics character Martian Manhunter. This will primarily cover the character's appearance in the House of Mystery comic from issue 160 to 173, which corresponds to a time from 1966 to 1968. At this point in history, the Cold War had been going on for 20 years. By 66, there had been 4 James Bond movies. Spy shows The Man from U.N.C.L.E., I Spy, Mission Impossible, The Avengers, and Danger Man were all going strong. Novelists Ian Fleming, John le Carré, and Leigh Danton were producing popular spy novels. Stories about spies were popular. So the versatile John Jones, who had taken a turn being a police detective, a superhero, and a supernatural investigator, becomes a spy. For these 14 issues, John goes undercover to infiltrate the Vulture crime syndicate led by Mr. V, or Faceless as he's usually called, because he is always seen wearing a featureless mask. It all starts in House of Mystery 160, where John is summoned to a briefing at an unnamed Special Security Department by a Mr. Steele. Wait, was this Sarge Steele? No, absolutely not. At this time, Sarge Steele did not belong to DC, so this is a completely different guy. How this agency recruits John isn't really clear, but they enlist him to go after the Vulture crime syndicate. Now, this Special Security Department never shows up again, nor does Mr. Steele. John doesn't really check in with them or work with them at all. So the element of being part of a spy agency isn't really there. But if you think about it, if there is an enemy organization that you can't get any information on, and it may have heavily infiltrated your own organization, it makes sense to secretly enlist a superpowered shape-changer to infiltrate them without any support or backup from a possibly compromised agency. Anyway, the agency gives John the one lead they have, the identity of a loner playboy and man of mystery, and John sets off to take down Vulture by himself. John begins by following this playboy, Marco Xavier, and Xavier immediately drives off a cliff and his car explodes into flames. John decides to take his identity, and I want to stress that John doesn't kill a rich playboy and take his identity to live a life of leisure. The death was 100% accidental. Probably. Maybe. Anyway, John shape changes into Xavier and begins to live in his posh Mediterranean villa as he studies him in order to impersonate Xavier, the rich playboy with loads of female friends. As for his trusty sidekick Zook, he stays behind to keep living in a sealed-off cave. Not that Zook doesn't show up occasionally, and there are a few visits, but it seems pretty harsh for Zook to be left living in a cave while his buddy goes off to live in a Mediterranean villa. Poor Zook didn't even get to join the Teen Titans. Let's pretend that Zook has a rich and emotionally fulfilling life being friends with Diane. So, John begins his new life as a swinging playboy, which is a very different interpretation of John than anywhere else. But during this time, he is often surrounded by multiple female admirers, and it seems he spends a large amount of time in the company of multiple women. Perhaps he was trying to experience the full range of human experience. Now, this is a kids' comic governed by the Comics Code in the 60s, so it is fairly chaste, and John by no means acts lecherous in any way. The women are mainly like, "Spend time with us, Marco!" And he's like, "Sorry, ladies, I have to go do spy-type things." But if you read through the lines even a little bit, you can tell that John is being someone multiple ladies enjoy spending time with. Anyway, the plot hook of a half-Martian offspring from John's day as an international man of mystery seems pretty cool to me. Anyway, the new set of stories tends to take on a new pattern. John is impersonating Marco Xavier, a free agent who is often hired by Vulture to perform some task. John performs the task, engages in criminal activities, and often lets criminals go in order to get more information about their activities. John is paid for his activities, and the comics often mention exact amounts, but Silver Age heroes cannot be seen benefiting from their power, so John makes it clear in thought bubbles that this money is going to charity. Which begs the question, how does John maintain his international playboy lifestyle and keep up his Mediterranean villa? I suppose he just pulls gold from seawater like he did in his first appearance. After working for Vulture as Xavier, John then uses the information he gathers to then go after the criminals and foil their plots. This pattern gets intricate in some cases, like when he's hired to help assassinate himself or discover his own weakness. This pattern is so used where they actually call it out in the comics, stating that most plans involving Xavier get foiled by the Martian Manhunter. And although John foils many plots, Faceless isn't caught, and John only disrupts a single Vulture cell. Faceless often shows up at the end and mocks John from a video screen. The Vulture organization itself is composed of criminals. There aren't any members who have infiltrated into positions of authority, like you might see in a more adult or modern spy story. This is censorship, and the comics code yet again. The censorship also limits the kind of crimes depicted. It's mainly theft and obtaining powerful weapons. Vulture also has a couple super soldier programs, which John shuts down. They also try to recruit an alien criminal, so they are up to all sorts of evil power accumulation. A few stories during this time deviate from the battle with Vulture. One of them involves a gang of 7 evil Martians coming to Earth with plans to conquer it. One interesting thing these evil Martians do is turn themselves into Martian beasts called Memenixes. It essentially acts as their battle form, which is a pretty good idea that John uses in the future, although very rarely. John and Zook are able to defeat these Martians with a single candle that the Martians don't even see, so they don't even realize why they are losing their powers. These Martians flee, and John goes up and interferes with their ships, causing them to explode, and presumably the 7 fleeing Martians die horribly in flames. John doesn't say anything about their fate, but does lament the loss of the ships, which he could use to visit home. Of course, this ignores the issue where he got the ability to return home, not to mention his association with the Justice League that has members like Green Lantern and the Hawks who have an actual spaceship. Anyway, I usually try and leave the future for future videos, but this story shares many similarities to issue 1 through 4 of JLA by Grant Morrison in 1996. The number of Martians changes from 7 to 8, they disguise themselves as beasts instead of superheroes, and the scene with a single candle is replaced by a crowd with lighters. But given that Grant Morrison often drew inspiration from the Silver Age, it is possible that this story helped inspire the JLA Hyperclan story. Soon after this Martian invasion, the Vulture arc, and indeed the Martian Manhunter feature, comes to a close in House of Mystery 173. Now this story ends with a pretty decent twist, so if you don't want spoilers to this half-century-old story, you might want to end here. So in this final issue, Faceless has Xavier steal a powerful experimental gun, which gets him wanted by the police. Faceless then brings Xavier to his base and reveals that he has always known that Marco Xavier is the Martian Manhunter, because Faceless is Marco Xavier, and he had faked his own death. It puts this weird twist on the entire arc, because Faceless was also just kind of playing with John the whole time. And in this final issue, he claims that it has all been to get John into his trap. Yes, all his numerous other failures were just part of an intricate plot.
I meant to do that.
Sure. Faceless disables John with fire and then prepares to kill him with his experimental gun. Instead of killing John, the gun explodes and you get a final panel of John commenting on how it was ironic. So while the twist was kind of cool, the end feels like a letdown. The bad guy loses because his gun was defective. But you at least get an ending issue to finish the arc, which is better than what he got in the Justice League, which was just being dropped from the book without any mention. I'm not exactly sure why the Martian Manhunter feature ended, but at this point I think Jack Miller became an editor for the romance comics. Joe Certa leaves DC around this time, and Joe Orlando becomes executive editor for House of Mystery, which returns to its roots as more of a horror mystery comic, and goes into reprinting old stories. So personnel changes at DC may have ended the Martian Manhunter in the Silver Age, and apparently he wasn't popular enough to be picked up by another creative team. Now, the character would persist into what is called the Bronze Age of comics, but that will be the subject of the next video. If you like this content, like, subscribe, and comment so I will know to continue producing it.